Hello, it is time to talk crypto policy and regulation. I'm Jen Sanasi here with my co-host partner at Paul Hastings, Renato Mariatti. You will find us live on CoinDesk's social channels every other week talking crypto policy and regulation. Now, today's show is a very special one. We have two very special guests. Crypto mom and dad will be joining us. Former CFTC chairman Chris Giancarlo will be with us shortly, followed by SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce. Renato, we have an incredible show today. I'm excited to get it started with you. Talk to me about how you're feeling. The last 2 weeks have been an epic 2 weeks for policy and regulation, as they always are.
Yeah, well, this has been a whirlwind, Jen. We had the announcement of a crypto task force at the SEC, which Commissioner Peirce is heading up. We had that executive order that you and I talked about, a couple of weeks ago, or it seems like it was just a week ago, where we had the president ordering the creation of a working group, bringing together all the stakeholders with David Sachs, the crypto czar, heading that up. And then yesterday, we got to watch that press conference, and it sure looked like we're going to have a legislative solution with Senator Scott suggesting that it would be within 100 days.
Yep.
I mean, that's amazing, amazing progress. There's so much to talk about, and I can't imagine two better guests.
I know, I really can't imagine it either. Let's get right to it. We're going to welcome now Senior Counsel at Wilkie Farr and Gallagher and former CFTC Chairman Chris Giancarlo, also known as Crypto Dad. Welcome to the show.
Jen, Renato, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
It's great to have you with us. I just want to kick it off here. I mean, you served as chairman of the CFTC under Trump's last presidency. Talk to me about what you expect to see from the CFTC as we move into this new administration.
Well, we're already starting to see a new CFTC, a change of pace there under acting chairman Caroline Pham. Some of her actions in terms of really getting to grips with the enforcement unit and its approach to enforcement, really ruling out regulation by enforcement, which is also happening at the SEC, and focusing on how do we get good rules out before we just go after companies for foot faults, for failure to register and other items without a regulatory path. So we're really seeing that change. I also expect the legislation to address an issue that's been on the table for a while. It's one that I and my successors at the CFTC on both sides of the aisle, both former Chairman Benham and Heath Tarbert, and I support extending the CFTC's jurisdiction for spot markets for digital commodities. And I expect to see that in the legislation. So there's a lot happening. We're only 2 weeks into a new administration, but we're already seeing the downstream impacts at the market regulators, the SEC and the CFTC.
Well, Chris, you mentioned Caroline Pham. I get to talk to her this weekend. She's certainly gone in full steam ahead, which I don't think should surprises either
Anybody
of
that knows
us.
Caroline knows she's only got one speed, which is full speed ahead.
100%, 100%. So she's already doing a whole lot of things. There had been some discussion and speculation that there might be a combination of the CFTC and SEC, with the Doge folks. And
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you asked that, actually, Renato, because that's something that I spent a lot of time on during my term as chairman of the agency. You may recall in 2017, the incoming Trump administration, under Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, looked at that very issue, and they asked me, and I said, look, as a former M&A lawyer, why don't we do an analysis, as any business would, to see what synergies would emerge from merging the two agencies? Let's take an objective rule and just see how many taxpayer dollars can we save. And in fact, it was in a published report by Treasury, the analysis showed that merging the two agencies would only generate about $9 million in savings. Now, that's savings. I'm not going to look down askance at $9 million. But would we sacrifice something in doing that? And I believe we would. The CFTC exists to protect professional markets for hedging risk, primarily risk in holding dollars. It's no coincidence that CFTC was formed in the 1970s. At the same time, the US went off the gold standard. And in order to preserve the dollar's reserve currency status, countries around the world needed to be able to hedge their dollar risk in exchange rates, their dollar risk in foreign exchange rates. And that's what the CFTC oversees. It oversees professional markets. It's why investor protection is not a primary objective or a primary mission for the CFTC as it is for the SEC. So the agencies take very different approaches. And I'd add two other points. One is our founders were very comfortable with the idea of agencies competing for power. They felt it was the best way to keep power from aggregating and under centralized control. Imagine if the CFTC had been merged into the SEC 4 years ago, and then Gary Gensler took control of the combined agencies. What would have happened to Bitcoin futures and Ethereum futures that we created during the first Trump administration? Would they have been extinguished if Gary Gensler had able to get his hands on them? So I think there's actually very little to be achieved by merging the agencies in terms of taxpayer savings, but a lot to be lost in terms of the CFTC's very unique principles-based approach to regulation and its role in safeguarding the dollar as the world's reserve currency.
Great point. And I think you're going to find a lot of folks in this industry who would not want Gary Gensler running both of those agencies. We're much happier with the CFTC. I just, as a follow-up, I got this sense from the press conference yesterday, Chris, that the fact that the Senate and House Ag Committee chairs were there and praising the CFTC and talking about their role in overseeing the CFTC gave me, I thought, a clear signal that the CFTC isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm actually working on an op-ed, which you'll see in the next couple of weeks on this very issue, because I was there at the time we did the analysis of merging it during Trump 45. And I think that there was a very thorough analysis we did. It's a very good paper, which I'll cite in my op-ed that was put out by the Treasury Secretary back then. We did that analysis. I don't want to say $9 million of savings are negligible, but for that savings, let's not lose. They're very different agencies, the CFTC. They have the same 5-commissioner structure, et cetera. But the CFTC is principles-based regulation. The SEC is rules-based regulation. The CFTC is about market integrity, market depth, and liquidity, not so much investor protection, because these are mostly professional markets that don't need that type of investor protection that retail investors in SEC markets receive. So they have a different orientation. Any combination of the two agencies would not be a merger. It would be a takeover by the SEC. And we've seen that, under singular control, the SEC can be very dangerous to markets, but very dangerous to innovation. I think the last 4 years showed what hostility to innovation can do to an industry. And thank goodness the CFTC was independent during those 4 years and continued its a welcoming approach to innovation compared to the way the SEC. So I, for one, am not in favor of a merger. I don't think it saves the taxpayer much money, and I think it could do a lot of harm to our financial markets.
Chris, I got to ask you, we have acting chair Caroline Pham. The president has not yet named his pick for the chair of the CFTC. I mean, it could be Caroline Pham. We don't know yet. What do you make of this? Could this signal that he is maybe leaning towards merging the two?
And knowing President Trump, as I had the pleasure to get to know him when he was my boss a few years ago, keeping his options open, it would be characteristic. I think there's probably some in the Doge community that actually are new to Washington. They probably just look at these things on paper and say, why do we have two different financial regulators? Some of my European colleagues, where they have a singular market regulator, also ask me often, why in the US, uniquely amongst major developed economies, do you have two different financial regulators? And my answer is simple. Because our derivative markets are 10 times the size of any other major economy. It's the customized approach. It's the focus that we can bring to derivative markets that have made those markets the envy of the world and the world's largest by a factor of 10. And I think without the unique oversight that the CFTC brings, a principle-based oversight, an innovation-friendly oversight, we wouldn't enjoy the derivative markets we do. More new products have emerged under CFTC oversight over the last 20 years than almost all of the world's financial markets combined. I mean, that's a record of friendliness to innovation that is the envy of the world. And I think it's because we have a unique regulator with a principle-based approach overseeing those markets. And I think we'd lose something if it was brought under the much bigger and perhaps more dominating world of the SEC.
So, Chris, yesterday we heard from the lawmakers that they are looking at a legislative proposal along the lines of Fit 21. In fact, that was invoked multiple times as essentially a starting point. Can you give us your thoughts on how the CFTC and SEC would work together and what the split might look like under that sort of legislation? Because that legislation contemplates, I think, shared responsibilities for the two agencies.
Often when you look at something, look at its origin story. And Fit 21 has really got a great origin story. And that is, almost, I don't know if it's the first time in history, but unique in congressional history. You had the House Financial Services Committee and the House Ag Committee, along with other committees, introducing that legislation at the same time, demonstrating that they saw a comprehensive approach to the regulation of digital assets. Some might be digital security, some might be digital commodities, and the need to work together. Now, Fit 21 has got Senate sponsors, and as it was proposed yesterday, the notion that there would be a priority list that would work bicamerally between the Senate and the House to get Fit 21 done. This is really the way Congress should work in a very comprehensive fashion. So the point I'm making is, I actually think that looking forward, the forecast is actually good, that we might get the kind of harmony amongst the different committees of jurisdiction, which might bring the SEC and the CFTC to work better together, as quite frankly they did during Trump 45, when Jay Clayton and I, and then subsequently Heath Tarbert, had a very good working relationship. The type of working relationship that did not exist during Biden, when it was well known that the heads of those agencies often would publicly disagree at international forums, to quite frankly the embarrassment of the United States. We need to get back to a point where the SEC and the CFTC work well together, respect each other's different approaches, but work well and harmoniously together. And I'm confident that the way it was done in Trump 45 will work again in Trump 47, whether it's Caroline Pham at the CFTC and certainly my dear friend Paul Atkins at the SEC, former classmate. They're going to work very well together. And whether it's Caroline or somebody else for permanent chair, I'm confident these agencies and their committees of jurisdiction are going to work very well together.
All right, Chris, we got to wrap it there. I think that the three of us could talk on this topic forever. So you got to come back to the show. You got to join us. We got to continue the conversation. I know there's going to be a ton to talk about throughout this year. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing that insight.
Let's do that, Jen. Let's do that, Renato. We can get together again soon.
That was Senior Counsel at Wilkie, Farr and Gallagher and former CFTC Chairman Chris Giancarlo. All right, Crypto Dad has left us, and we are now bringing Crypto Mom in to give the SEC side to this conversation. Commissioner Hester Peirce recently published 10 priorities for the new crypto task force that she is leading. Let's welcome her to the show now. Welcome, Commissioner Peirce.
Thanks, Jen. It's good to see you, and good to see you also, Renato. Of course, I want to tell you my views are my own views as a commissioner, not necessarily those of the SEC or my fellow commissioners.
All right, let's get right into The Journey Begins. You published a statement yesterday outlining a road ahead with less surprises for crypto firms in the U.S. than the road behind us. Just give us a quick foundation here. What does the journey ahead look like for you? Where would you like to lead the agency towards?
I think what I'm hoping is that we can get to clarity, which is something that has eluded us for a long time now. And so trying to get to clarity around what is within our jurisdiction, what lies outside our jurisdiction. And then for things that are within our jurisdiction, helping people figure out how to comply with our rules, where exemptions are necessary, making those exemptions, and then also ensuring that they can actually have commercial viability, which is something that, again, we haven't paid much attention to in the past.
We had just talked, obviously, to Chris Giancarlo about his perspective of the relationship between the SEC and CFTC. Obviously, you formed your crypto task force. How do you see the SEC and the CFTC working together to establish this framework for crypto regulation?
Yeah, I mean, I liked his characterization of the need for a harmonious relationship, and that's something that, as he mentioned, we did have before. We worked together very closely. I was working on the issue of bringing our securities-based swaps regime up and getting that up and running, and that was something that we had to work extremely closely with the CFTC on, because they've got a parallel regime for swaps, and so. I think we can take that model and we can import it to this discussion. And certainly I have a good relationship with Acting Chairman Pham and with the other commissioners there. So I'm looking forward to that work. And I think we can make some good progress together.
I got to ask you, I read your 10 points. I want to know how you're thinking about examining crypto assets under this new task force. The big question is around the Howey test. It was a really contentious point, I think, over the last 4 years. Will the Howey test be used in defining whether a crypto asset is a security or not, or are we looking at a completely new framework?
Well, the Howey test is out there. It's a court test, and so we have to consider that with respect to all kinds of different schemes that come in front of us, right? And so that includes the purchase and sale of crypto assets. But I think we have not thought with a lot of legal precision. And so what I want us to do is go back to the drawing board and try to think more carefully about when an asset itself might be a security, which is possible, and then when the broader question of when something might be sold in connection in a securities transaction. And so in that instance, the Howey test might still come into play, but we want to make it clear so that people know one way or the other whether they're in or out, and what the implications are for secondary transactions, which is, again, something that is complicated if you're talking about an investment contract under Howey.
To Commissioner Peirce, one thing that was left from the road behind, as you put it, the road behind us, is a wake of enforcement matters that are still open against all sorts of market participants in this space. I know you've expressed disagreement with some of those enforcement actions in the past. What is your perspective regarding how those enforcement actions should be handled and wrapped up going forward?
Yeah, well, as I said in the roadmap, this has been a long time in the making, and figuring out how to disentangle all the different strands, including the enforcement strands, is not an easy undertaking. It's something that we have to think about. I don't want to talk about any individual enforcement actions, but just to say broadly that we are thinking about this in the context of the broader task force mandate, which is to try to have a clear path, one that people understand before we come in with an enforcement action. And so part of that is trying to make sure that our enforcement tool is being used the way it should be used, which is to enforce rules that are clear, that people understand, and not being used to set policy, which it has been used for over the past several years. So that's where we want to get. Now, what that will mean for individual enforcement actions, that's it's going to depend on the facts and circumstances. I will say that there are a lot of people who are out there trying to use crypto in name as a shield for whatever fraud they're trying to perpetrate. And those folks should not think that they're going to get a free pass now that we're on this new journey. The goal of this new journey is to get to a place where people can try interesting new things, but those interesting new things don't include defrauding other people. So that's the balance that we're trying to achieve.
Commissioner Peirce, you've been talking about this for a long time, right? This regulatory sandbox that allows allows firms to experiment with innovation. And one of your points took that even further and looked at, cross-border innovation. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you see that working. Like how can we experiment with cross-border innovation from here in the States? What are the complexities that might be presented?
Well, it certainly is complicated. We were just talking about how we have to work with our fellow financial regulators like the CFTC here in the US, and that can be complicated, can be even more complicated when you talk about dealing with regulators outside the US. But one thing that is very obvious to anyone involved in this space is that it is a very international industry. And we have, in the past several years, been in a place where people have decided to move outside of the United States and exclude US persons. And now what I would like us to think about is not only inviting people back into the United States, but also saying to people who have built things outside the United States or are building things outside the United States that there's an opportunity to try experiments that cross borders, that are there. They can run their experiment in their jurisdiction where in another jurisdiction and then run that same experiment here in the US. And I think that will lead to a better understanding by us as regulators of how products and services work. It will lead to more effective, I think, product market fit tests for folks. But I think it will also lead to a healthier ability to collaborate both on the regulatory side and then in the industry across borders, which is where we want to ultimately get.
Commissioner Peirce, I'm interested in your perspective regarding state regulatory bodies and what role they could play or should play going forward. I mean, a new piece of legislation could preempt their role in this space entirely. But many are concerned that they're going to step up and continue what we've seen from the road behind us.
Yeah, and again, this is an issue that is not limited to crypto. There are always questions because we do have a federal regime and then we have state regulators as well. And we work closely with state regulators in lots of areas, and we will work closely with them in this area too. It's up to Congress to decide if they think it makes more sense to have a federal only approach to some or all areas of crypto. But I think we've seen in the states leadership, and I don't want to lose that either. States have tried different models to regulating, different kinds of charters. And so we have a lot to learn from the states too. So we shouldn't forget that, and they should be part of that conversation.
One of the big criticisms, I guess, of the SEC over the past 4 years was that firms were saying they were trying to engage, they were trying to get clarity, they hit a brick wall and then they would get slapped with a lawsuit. Talk to us a little bit about how that might change under this new crypto task force.
Well, we put out a call yesterday that we really do want people to come in. We want people to come in with concrete ideas of what we should be doing from a regulatory perspective that applies to everyone, but we also want people to come in with their ideas about what they're trying to do and the roadblocks they're running into so that we can work through those roadblocks. And so the best I can do is to tell people that we really do want to have this conversation. We are not taking an enforcement first approach. We're taking an approach that is trying to get to regulatory clarity, to again, regulations that achieve our objectives and also allow people to try new things. So I think when people start to see that that is a reality and they see projects coming through the other side of the door with the ability to move forward, that will encourage other people to come in.
There's been a big movement in this administration towards efficiency. There's been a kind of a look at all the agencies with this Doge initiative. And it appears that there's been some change already at the CFTC where they're doing a top-down review and some reorganization. Do you have any thoughts on how that might impact the SEC, a much bigger organization with many more people doing a variety of things?
Well, at the SEC, the chairman is the one to whom all the staff answer. And so a lot of those operational and organizational issues are within the chairman's remit, and that is Chairman Ueda. But I think we're always looking for ways that we can be more efficient, that we can, again, think about how to use our different tools, because that affects our efficiency. Should we be writing a guidance document or a rule? Should we be using enforcement for an existing rule? Should we be using our examination tools? And so that should always be something that we're thinking about. How can we use the people we have the most efficiently? And I think that will be something that we're thinking about as the crypto task force as well.
Just lay it out for our audience. Give us a timeline here. There is this crypto task force. It sounds like there's a lot of thinking happening around a lot of challenges that have been experienced in the industry. When will something concrete come out of this, and what might that look like?
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen the elimination of SAB 121, which I think was a good start, and there were folks across the commission that worked on that, and I think we'll just continue to try to make progress in many different areas, and that'll involve a lot of small steps. But I'm hoping that you will see those steps happening very soon. And I did counsel patience in that document I put out yesterday, because there are some difficult legal issues that have to be worked through, and so I want to do it right. But I think it's really important that we have a framework in place. One of the concerns that I've had about the past several years is that the lack of regulation has actually rewarded bad actors more than it has good actors. And I really want to encourage people to step up, make disclosures, and get information out there for people. And so for me, the faster we can move toward that, the better off everyone is.
One very quick question. Other than getting this regulatory framework out, which is very exciting, what one thing does the SEC need to do in order to create an environment for crypto and to allow it to flourish?
Well, I mean, I think it ties back to the earlier question about, you're in a place where people don't really trust the SEC anymore. There's been at least people in this industry have had a not good experience with the SEC. And so it really is building up that trust and reminding people. And that doesn't mean that anything goes. It just means that we want to be able to have interactions with the industry where we say, here's where our issues are, and industry can come back and say to us, here are our solutions, that we can have that conversation, that it can be a real conversation, and that real results can come out the other side. I think that will build up that trust again, but it's certainly going to be a job to do that.
All right, Commissioner Peirce, we got to wrap it there. But like I said to Chris Giancarlo, we love having you on the show. Please come back again. There's going to be a lot to talk about this year. It was a pleasure hearing your insights.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you. That was SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce. Well, Renato, we got a lot to talk about this year, but one of the things that I think we should unpack right now is the press conference that happened yesterday. More than 200,000 people watched it live on CoinDesk's socials. We heard from the crypto and AI czar, David Sachs. I know you have written a bunch of thoughts and insights on what you heard yesterday. So talk to me a little bit about what you took away, because I have to say I was a little disappointed.
You were?
Yeah, I thought, I'll tell you why after, but you talk to me about what you took away.
Okay, a few things. I mean, first of all, when I read the executive order had the words regulatory all through it, didn't talk rulemaking and so on, did not talk about legislation. There's one spot where it mentioned legislation. So a lot of people thought, okay, this means they're not going to go through Congress. They're going to be focused on just having executive branch rulemaking. That clearly is not the case after yesterday's press conference. And what you heard from all of the lawmakers was they're committed to doing this quickly, 100 days, bipartisan, they're ready to go, using FIT 21 as the framework. I mean, that's for sure one thing that was a big takeaway. Another clear takeaway I alluded to earlier, CFTC is going to be around. I mean, obviously the president has his own ideas. And things appear maybe, as Chris Giancarlo said, a little up in the air there. But there's no question that the Senate and House Ag Committee chairs believe very strongly that the CFTC should exist, and now they made that abundantly clear yesterday. And there was also, I thought, Caroline, excuse me, Jen, very interesting insights, that we got a peek into the views of the lawmakers regarding stablecoins and money laundering. I mean, they talked about a stablecoin legislation. It's going to be out soon, and they really did seem to think that we still needed to have very strong money laundering controls.
Well, that's interesting. I said I was a little disappointed, but the fact that the stablecoin bill is moving, I think they said the stablecoin bill and Fit 21 are moving in lockstep. They hope to get that passed very soon, like you said, within a 100-day time frame. The disappointing thing for me was, we've been hearing about the stablecoin bill, what, forever. It feels like forever, right? And so it's like, I really hope that bill can be passed, but I feel like we've heard this before. And the second thing was the strategic Bitcoin reserve. I think a lot of people in this industry were expecting something to happen really quickly, as things have been happening under this administration. And we heard yesterday from David Sachs that, they're still forming the committee. Not all of the members have been confirmed, and they will be exploring the feasibility of this. And that, I felt like, took a little bit of air out of the industry. We did a live just like this one yesterday, and a lot of the comments were kind of echoing that sentiment. And so I'm curious about what your thoughts were on that question from the Yahoo Finance reporter about the strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Yeah, I mean, I really read, Jen, the executive order that came out previously as a walkback of Trump's promise regarding that. Trump on the campaign trail talked a lot about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We're going to establish it. It's going to happen. And what that would, I think a lot of people took that to mean, is that the federal treasury was going to be buying a lot of Bitcoin. But if you read that executive order, they say they're going to study the idea of this. They're not going to, they didn't say they're going to do it. They're going to study it. And then instead of using the term strategic Bitcoin reserve, they talk about a stockpile of digital assets to be created from, and they suggested that they would get it from stuff that they seize through law enforcement actions. Well, that's very different. That means a slow build up rather than a massive purchase from the Treasury. It means doesn't even need to be Bitcoin. Could be a variety of different tokens. And they're studying it. A lot of things get studied in Washington and don't actually occur.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the conversation we just had. We just had a great conversation with former CFTC chairman Chris Giancarlo. Then we had SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce. Talk to me about what you're taking away from this, what you're taking into the next 2 weeks. What might we see develop at the SEC and the CFTC from here?
Well, a couple things. I mean, first of all, as I alluded to during my conversation with Commissioner Peirce and with Chris Giancarlo, there's no question there's a lot going on at the CFTC. Caroline Pham, the acting chair, is acting as if this is her agency and she's going to plow ahead and she's going to be there a while. She's already reorganized the Division of Enforcement. She's doing a top to bottom review of all of the enforcement matters, and everything that the commission is doing is on hold right now as she does that. And she is I got a very different vision for what the not only the Division of Enforcement, but what the agency is doing. So I think her and Commissioner Peirce are going to be working together in lockstep to try to find ways to enable the crypto industry to be able to work with existing rules, existing laws, existing tools that are already on the books while we wait for this legislative solution. So I think they're going to work faster than even the legislative process. So I think we should be staying tuned for some changes. Obviously, Commissioner Peirce put out her thoughts. I think we're going to, see something soon from acting chair Pham as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Commissioner Peirce's task force can come up with. Like I said, for as long as I've had this job, Commissioner Peirce has been trying to get her regulatory sandbox off the ground. It seems like she now has agency to do this within this crypto task force. And I look forward to seeing what kind of clarity that can bring for the industry, what kind of innovation that can bring back to the shores here in the United States. I know that I bring this up all the time. Previously, you've said, you had advised clients to maybe take their business offshore. I know that that is not the case anymore under the new administration, but I look forward to seeing, what a little bit of flexibility can bring for entrepreneurs in the industry.
I mean, this is an exciting time. I think, Jen, in the next, 3 to 6 months, we're going to know what the regulatory framework is going to be for crypto in the United States. And we're going to have new legislation, we're going to have new rulemaking. And that executive order that we talked about earlier is creating a group of every stakeholder. I mean, everyone from the Justice Department to Treasury is going to be involved in that. So there's no question this is about as 180-degree turn as you could imagine from the government regarding crypto. And really, it's going to be up to the industry to seize on that. And I think despite all the discussion of a reserve or stockpile, I think that's the most important thing because it's ultimately giving the industry not only the opportunity to build businesses and grow, but also to receive the legitimacy and the investment from more traditional
Mhm.
actors that it really deserved and needed in the banking ability and so on.
Well, Renato, I think that is a fantastic note to wrap the show up on. It's always a pleasure having the show with you every second week. We've covered so much in such a short amount of time, and there is so much left to cover. I look forward to continuing the show with you. So, once again, thank you for joining me. And for our audience who's watching, we're here every second week. Pop in, leave us your comments, give us your feedback. We'd love to know what you think. So, Renato, thank you.
And thanks to all of you for watching. Your comments throughout have been interesting. I've tried to incorporate some of what you said into my questions, but please continue to give us feedback because this show is really, I think, a real center for discussion on all these issues.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Renato. Thank you to our audience. We are here every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. I know it is Wednesday today. It was a little bit of an odd week, but pop in every other Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. We are live across CoinDesk's social channels. Thank you